and he's back with us here on this Thursday morning. Ben, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are y'all doing?
Doing good, man. Everybody has been just kind of peeking into Cincinnati from South Louisiana to see how Burrow looks and how Jamar Chase is moving around and the opening days of Cincinnati's camp. But let's start with the quarterback. You've had a chance now to see Burrow working out with that knee brace over the first couple of days of training camp. How is number 9 moving around there?
You know what? It's really hard to tell, to be quite honest. And what we've seen so far hasn't been great, if I'm going to be, to be frank. Burrows had the day off yesterday, and it wasn't really clear if it was a scheduled day off or the coaching staff felt like he needed it. I know talking to the staff throughout camp, they were evaluating kind of how Burrow was looking and kind of it seems like they always in the back of their mind knew that there might be, resting him eventually might be a good idea, especially when you think about how hard he's done, how hard in the rehab process and kind of how much work he did in the offseason to be fully cleared at this point. So he's definitely been going a lot, but so far in camp, he just hasn't really looked like he did, before he got injured last year. The offense has really struggled to gain any sense of rhythm. Downfield, they haven't really been able to connect with, Joe and Jamar or Joe and T. Higgins. And it didn't really look quite right. I don't know if Joe was really comfortable yet. We haven't spoken to Joe since camp started. He talked before the first practice and then afterwards. We haven't really spoken to him since. So it's hard to tell what Joe's feeling right now. But, obviously the coaching staff saw, the last couple of days, before his rest day, he had a couple of interceptions. He had and just wasn't really looking right to us, just watching on the sideline. So, that rest day couldn't have come at a better time for him. And, this is going to be a really interesting 3-day stretch where they're going to have practices Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And we'll see how Burrow responds, how he looks, if he's a little more comfortable in the pocket. It's become a very interesting storyline to watch as the Bengals open up training camp.
Ben, has there been any discussion or was there any discussion during this rehabilitation process that he may be pushing it a little too extreme to get? I mean, because there were discussions when he first got hurt that he might miss like this season. And to see him at OTAs and then in training camp and not miss a snap and not miss a rep was very surprising for a lot of people down here. Was there any discussion from people in or around the situation up there saying he might need to back off a little bit and just, back the timeline up?
Yeah, no, I think I think that's just who Burrow is. I think one coach described him as an animal going out there and kind of how he did the rehab process. You look at what he did and how he was on the field for OTAs and still participating, going through all his rehab, pretty extensively. I find it funny whenever, someone asks him, do you feel grateful that you're back? He's like, no, not really. Because when you say grateful, it implies that, there's a lot of chance, and there really isn't a lot of chance. I worked really hard to get ready and to be fully cleared and do the things I need to do. And that's just who he is. Yeah. And so, I think that's kind of the catch-22 with that. If you want him, ready for training camp, there is a lot of work that goes into the off season. But, so far, it may just be he's not comfortable on the knee. Now, granted, there is an interesting caveat to this. The Bengals lost their right tackle to a hamstring injury. I think he actually got hurt on an interception that Joe threw a couple of days ago, and he's kind of been day-to-day with a hamstring injury. Well, the 2 backup tackles as well who have experience, they're also hurt. So the Bengals put in, in Burrow's last practice, rookie Deontay Smith, who I think they really like and they think he's got some potential. But unfortunately for him, on Tuesday, he got matched up against Sam Hubbard, who just signed a $40 million extension, and Hubbard gave Deontay his welcome to the NFL moment. And so I'm sure for Joe that wasn't, exactly the most pleasant thing as well. So there's a lot of factors that go into a lot of this. The receivers haven't been as helpful at times for Burrow either. So, there's a lot of circumstances contributing to potentially why the offense hasn't been clicking so far.
The offensive line obviously did not protect Joe, up to par last season, and he was injured in a gruesome hit in the regular season last year. How has the upgrade been to that position, and what do they look like going into the fall?
Yeah, so far, it's really difficult to gauge where their offensive line is at. On one hand, we've got Zach Taylor telling us don't read into too much of the offensive line rotation. And yet, It looks like, Michael Jordan, who is mainly culpable for Burrow getting hurt, if we're being quite honest, looks like he's been repping, with the ones at left guard, rookie Jackson Carman, who started, ended out, was their second round pick and ended OTAs as starting right guard. He's now working back in with the ones after being demoted for that first week or those first couple of practices. And then Riley Reif, they like him a lot, but he's been hurt the last couple of days and then day to day with that hamstring injury. So, we'll see what that whole unit looks like. I'm really curious, once we get into these preseason games, who's going to be healthy. One of the big caveats is starting center Trey Hopkins. It looks like he's not going to play all preseason. He's coming off a knee injury as well. And so that he suffered in week 17. So I think that's going to be a unit that we really fully don't know how good it's going to be until you get to week 1, which is going to be a really interesting time. It's going to be really interesting to see how this all plays out, because theoretically you're not going to have Burrow or your starting center, go live in a game that's not, that's in a non-practice setting until that season opener.
What has been the return on Ja'Marr Chase? How good is he now that you guys have had a chance to see him in person?
Yeah, to be honest, you see a lot of the fluidity, a lot of the things that make Ja'Marr a really exciting prospect and why he was so good at LSU. But, Ja'Marr has had his share of rookie moments. He's had a good amount of drops, for being honest, so far through camp. But yesterday I thought he made a really great catch. It was honestly probably one of the better throws that's been made the last few days. Back up Brandon Allen, who was out there running with the ones, threw a deep ball to Ja'Marr, and Ja'Marr just went up, twisted, and got it. He high-pointed it really well, and, that's probably the best rep we've seen for Ja'Marr. And the second one was Joe and Ja'Marr connecting on a deep out, and the Bengals back together practice on Saturday inside the stadium in front of fans. But, I was talking to a guy yesterday, and he was saying, some of that stuff, that some of the drops are just, some rookie things, and I don't think that's going to be too much of a concern. We didn't see it at LSU. And in the big moments, Ja'Marr delivered and was that go-to guy for Joe. So I think that's not something that I anticipate being a problem. And as Ja'Marr kind of gets his footing underneath him and gets better, gets more familiar with things, you'll see him start to find his stride and start to flourish.
Yeah, he rarely dropped the ball at LSU. I was sitting here trying to think back on where he did. He dropped one in the national championship game. He had a great night in the Natty versus Clemson, but he dropped one that hit him right in the hands. But when the lights come on, Uno's going to be there. I mean, he's usually the best player on the field, and when the moments are the biggest, that's when he's playing his best. Ben, we've talked about it down here, and obviously we're not as connected. We're not in the area, not in the location. The expectation for the Bengals, what is it going into this season? I mean, down here we have high expectation because we just know the Burrow effect, and then you add Ja'Marr Chase to the mix, and Thaddeus Moss is up there, and we've seen those guys succeed at such a high level. But now at the NFL, I mean, you got to become realistic about it. I know that they've made some offseason moves, and obviously bringing Ja'Marr into the offense as another explosive piece. But what is the true expectation in and around the fan base for Cincinnati here in year 2 of Burrow?
Yeah, I think this is a big show-me year for the franchise and for Zach Taylor in year 3. You look at 6 wins in 2 years, and I think Zach understands and the front office understands that there is an expectation from the fan base that this team should be competitive in 21. And when you look at what they've been doing with the roster the last couple of years, I don't know if it really was in a position to be truly competitive, for a full 16 and now 17 game season. But when you look at the draft picks they made and getting Burrow and T. Higgins and then Ja'Marr Chase with the 5th overall pick this year, they've done a lot of work in the draft and free agency and retooling the defensive side of the ball. Now the roster is situated and set up for this team to really be competitive, I think, in 2021. And at minimum, you're looking at a team that should be, hovering around the 500 mark. But, I wonder if the expectation isn't that they should be pushing for in the mix for a playoff berth in December, and at least be sniffing and be in striking distance for that towards the end of the season. And to be fair, when you're looking at a rebuild project in 3 years and at the NFL level, that's something that is feasible if you do it the right way. And, if the Bengals aren't competitive and there aren't any massive injuries, no big setbacks with Burrow or some of the other key pieces, then you've really got to say, okay, kind of what have we done here over the last 3 years, and what do we have to show, for all the work that we've done. And so there's going to be a lot of long-term questions about the future of the franchise, if they aren't, where they need to be at the end of the season.
Where does Thad Moss fit in?
Yeah, Thad's a really fascinating guy. I talked to him the other day, and he told me that he's just looking for a chance to kind of show what he can do on the field and get some reps. Obviously, missed last year with a foot injury. He's fully back, fully cleared, ready to go. He's obviously another LSU guy that they added along with, Tyler Shelvin, who they got in the draft and had a good rep yesterday as well, from what I saw in one-on-ones. And I think Thad, there's going to be a reserve tight end role for him. I know they really like their two tight ends, and TJ Uzomah and Drew Sample. They're going to get the bulk of the reps, but there is that tight end 3 position that can be a run blocking guy, can be used in certain packages and really be used on special teams. And that spot is going to be up for grabs, I think. And for Thad to go out there and secure that, I think these preseason games are going to be huge for him. If he can go out there and show that he can be versatile in his usage, not just on the offense, but in special teams as well, that's going to really help his chances of making the squad. So, I think I've got him slotted on my initial 53-man projection. From given, with the athleticism that he showed, I think that some of the special team stuff, you can learn how to do that over time. And obviously there's the Burrow connection as well. And that obviously doesn't hurt when you're looking at guys you want to keep around. So, I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunities during these preseason games for Thad to show that he deserves a spot on the 53-man roster.
One of the big losses for the New Orleans Saints last year on the defensive front was Trey Hendrickson. He's got 18 sacks over the last 2 seasons, 13.5 game last season in his contract year. How's he made an impact here early on the defense up there after signing with Cincinnati in free agency in the offseason?
I'll be honest. I was a little skeptical of the Trey Hendrickson signing when it happened at that price point and the commitment the Bengals made to him. And so far, Hendrickson's, been pretty impressive. He had an interception. He intercepted Burrow on Tuesday, and we all were just saying, okay, that's kind of what we're seeing here. And I think that was a big testament to, his willingness to buy into what they're asking him to do here. He's had a couple batted balls. He's been disruptive. And that's exactly what the Bengals are looking for. And in opposite him, Sam Hubbard has been that same way as well at defensive end. And there's going to be a lot of pressure. We talked about that on the team as a whole, but I think there's a lot of pressure on Hendrickson and the defense to really be more disruptive. This was a team that was last in the NFL in sacks. They let Carl Lawson walk in free agency, and a lot of people thought he was really underutilized and was probably better than his numbers suggested. And Trey Hendrickson, after that big year last year, I think that he's going to be asked to replicate that and prove that 2020 season wasn't a one-year wonder and that it wasn't a fluke. And if he's able to do that and be disruptive and really, be impactful, that's going to really boost the defense and indirectly help Burrow in the offense as well. So, we talked to Von Bell the other day, who also was with the Saints and played with Trey in New Orleans. And he said, he just kind of needed those reps and needed those opportunities to show what he can do. And now you're kind of seeing it. So, Von was thrilled to kind of see Trey do that. And there's going to be, it's going to be really fascinating to see how that plays out. And the Bengals need Trey to have another big year, and not just this year, but a big couple of years.
Ben Baby, who covers the Cincinnati Bengals up for ESPN.com, is joining us here on the Jordy Culotta Show. You can follow him on Twitter at Ben_Baby. Keep up with all of his work at ESPN.com. Just make sure and follow the Cincinnati Bengals to keep up on the latest. Last one, you brought up Shelvin, and Tyler had a nice career at LSU. At times his weight was a little up and down, but when he got right, he was an anchor on that defensive front for Dave Aranda, especially in that 19 championship run. What is the expectation around a mid-round draft pick in Shelvin and what he can provide to the center of that defense?
Yeah, Tyler's going to have another. It's going to be another one of these guys who has the opportunity to show what he can do in these preseason games. Their starting defensive tackle, Larry Ogunjobi, he's been dealing with a hamstring injury as well. So, Shelvin will get his opportunities to go in there as they rotate in. And Shelvin, I don't know if he's ever really been, y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, really been a big pass rush guy. Right. When you look at his size and what he can do, he's a guy that you really want him to eat up some gaps and free things up for the linebackers. And when you look at, what the Bengals are going to be looking for, in that 3-4 scheme, if they can play him at a one tech or shade him and really have him in the middle and clog things up. I think that's where he's going to be effective. And you let their young linebackers really fly around and make plays. And so he's going to get a lot of opportunities to do that, be a rotational guy. We'll see what that depth looks like once the season gets rolling and really how that depth chart is going to shake out. But I think Tyler's going to have a lot of chances to really show that he can earn, his snaps. And in the coaching staff, when you look at, what they've done over the last 2 years, you can definitely play your way into bigger roles as the season goes on. So if he's productive early, if he takes care of business, throughout camp and is where he needs to be physically, he'll get the opportunities to be on the field.
Ben, I know I said that was the last one. This is the last one, I promise. I fell in love with your work when you were doing college football, covering the sport at Dallas Morning News, and that's where you and I formed the relationship. What did you make of Texas and Oklahoma announcing that they're joining the SEC?
Yeah, first off, thanks for the kind words. It's been fun to see the SEC drama. It makes me feel like I'm back covering the conference again from a distance. And seeing all these old friends kind of pop up with all these, with keeping track of everything that's going on. Right. I think it makes sense. I mean, you look at the SEC West scheduling pattern. It's almost like they were preparing for this. I mean, how many teams have played Texas the last few years? You had Bama scheduling him. LSU scheduled them in 19. Texas will be playing Arkansas this year. I joke the only school that didn't want a piece of them was Texas A&M in the SEC West. I mean, they were the only ones that didn't want to do it. And I joked, well, if it's good enough for everybody else, I don't know why it's not good enough for the Aggies. But now that rivalry game, if they come over, it's going to have to be resumed. There's no bones about it. There's way too much money on the table. And when you look at playoff expansion and the strengthening of your conference and the rights, I think that it's a good move. Texas and Oklahoma, they're the cash cows in the Big 12. When you're looking at it, they're joining other programs who bring in an equal amount of revenue. And the Big 12, it really was those two programs who ran, financially, who ran the show. And Texas, on the field hasn't had the results, but them and A&M have been neck and neck in the amount of money brought in, year out. If you can give national championships to boosters, A&M and Texas will be duking it out on an annual basis. So they definitely will fit in the SEC really well. It's going to be fascinating to see how this all shakes out competitively. Can Alabama continue to rule the roost? I know LSU, and Ed Orgeron, they're going to be asked to have a bounce back year. And Jimbo and A&M have looked to send it. Can they do things well? I think the big factor in all of this, I wonder if people aren't, and I'm kind of removed from the situation now, but with the NIL coming in, I think the one thing that nobody has really discussed is are the donations to the athletic department still going to continue at the level that they were? Because, if you're a booster who's looking to support your program, why not do that? And if you've got a company and you're already donating a sizable amount, why not give that to the players directly instead of giving that to the athletic department? And so I'm wondering if the SEC isn't ramping up for maybe an offset of revenues. And if you can add Texas and Oklahoma, make your TV distribution package that much more lucrative, that may offset future losses because of NIL. And I don't know if that situation's really been discussed, but I think we're going to get to that point sooner rather than later. And I know that's kind of not what the NIL was specifically intended for, but we all know how loopholes work in college football and kind of how the revenue situation really works. So it's going to be really fascinating, but, the SEC, I think, will continue to be must-watch football when you add names like Texas and Oklahoma to the conference.
Ben Baby does a great job of covering the Cincinnati Bengals, but as you hear, has got a love and passion for just the sport of football and has for a long time. He's covering the Bengals up for ESPN.com now, and you can follow him on Twitter at Ben_Baby. He and I are discussing behind the scenes a possible routine stop by here during football season to keep us updated of what's going on up there with the Bengals. Thank you as always, man. Have a great weekend.
Hey, man, always enjoy. Appreciate y'all.